raging overnight in Charlotte, North Carolina after a deadly officer-involved shooting. Police officers hit with rocks and with a brick in the face, setting fires and shutting down traffic for hours. We are live with the breaking developments.
Meanwhile, brand new details about this accused terrorist. He had a jihad journal as we get surveillance of him, as you can see right there, dragging along a bag full of bombs. And now we know the FBI investigated him 2 years ago. What happened?
Yeah, a lot of questions still. And how's this for a history lesson? A high school teacher stomping on the American flag to teach his students it's not against the law. How about that for a demo? Great. Think about that where I remind you our slogan. You ready? Mornings are better with friends.
We start this hour with a Fox News alert. At least a dozen police officers hurt after riots explode in Charlotte overnight.
Disturbing video showing an officer hit in the head with a brick. Man. Looters setting fires and storming stores, all after police shot and killed a man that they say aimed a gun at them.
Yep, there's a lot to this story. That's not even the person they were looking for. Abby Huntsman is here live with the breaking details unfolding. Abby, you've been covering this all morning. What else do you have?
Yeah, we have been massive and angry crowds taking over the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina overnight, hours after police shoot and kill a man that they say aimed a gun at them. Well, rioters shutting down traffic on Interstate 85, looting cars and trucks and setting things on fire. Right now, police are standing guard outside of a Walmart, you can see there, surrounded by shattered glass after looters take over the store. And this incredible video showing rioters jumping on top of a police cruiser, other cop cars kicked and destroyed with large rocks. Officers dressed in riot gear trying to control the crowds by standing in lines. But as the night escalated, they were forced to deploy tear gas. At least 12 officers are hurt, including that one that we showed you earlier, who was hit in the face with a brick. A reporter also hurt in that chaos. The protests breaking out hours after police shot and killed 43-year-old Keith Scott. Officers were looking for another man when they saw Scott get out of his car holding a gun. Police say he was a threat, but Scott's sister claims he is disabled and was just waiting for his son to come home from school.
They jumped out their truck. They said, hands up. He got a gun. He got a gun. Pow, 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 pow. That's it. He had no gun.
So you heard it there. The family insists he was holding a book, but investigators say they recovered his gun from the scene. Well, the officer who pulled the trigger is now on administrative leave. Still no word on how many protesters were arrested overnight. But as you know, that town in Charlotte, you guys, is normally very peaceful.
Absolutely. It just takes an incident like this to ignite things. Thank you very much, Abby. To the best of our knowledge, to the best of our knowledge, there is no video that we have seen yet to show, one side says there was a gun, the other side there was no gun. We have not seen any video to show definitively what happened.
Yeah, and that wasn't the guy they were looking for anyway. And on top of that, you looked at what happened the day before in Tulsa. Not a good series of events when you talk about clashes with law enforcement. Meanwhile, let's talk about what happened over here over the weekend. We're still investigating the range of which and how many people were working with the New York, New Jersey bomber that attacked and's been arrested since for setting bombs in New York. Now we're finding out that the FBI actually was informed by the dad that my son could have been radicalized in 2014.
Yeah, listen to what the dad said.
Because
what happened?
He's doing bad.
He's doing bad? What did he do bad?
He stopped my son. He hit my wife, and I put him in the jail 2 years ago.
Who's he? What son did he stab?
Last year.
Okay, what happened? Why did he stab him?
That was for no reason. 2 years ago, I called the API. My son, he's doing very bad, okay? But they checked it almost 2 months.
Investigation's still going on, guys.
He's okay. He's clean. He's not a terrorist. I said, okay. Now he say he's a terrorist. I said, okay.
So 2 years ago, the dad goes to the cops, and the New Jersey cops turned it over to the FBI and said, yeah, my son's a terrorist. So here's the thing. The FBI did a little investigation, but the dad changed his story. Yep. He said, yeah, it never happened. Okay, so he went out and he said he was a terrorist, and then they said, okay, he wasn't a terrorist. The FBI, they say they closed it because they were unable to do a full investigation because of the retraction. They never did talk to the actual terrorist.
There's so many things that we're learning this morning. The bomb ingredients were bought on eBay. There was a journal with this guy that was on his property when he was found. There was a bullet hole through the journal. Inside the journal, it talked about death to your oppression, gunshots to your police, sounds of bombs will be heard in the streets. Those are his writings.
Yeah. Right, and the thing is, Ainsley, the one pattern we have is if you look at some of these guys, they're all somehow on the radar of the FBI at some point. And the question is the FBI allowed to take their restraints off and fully pursue them like they feel as though they should, or they feel as though that they're going to get labeled as profiling if they go after a Muslim who seems to be somebody that might have ties to terror, like, for example, this character who is over in Afghanistan and went to Quetta, Pakistan for about a year.
Sure. Had the FBI known that he had made these long trips and stopped in Pakistan for 13 months at one point, if they had known that he had this jihad...
Why don't they know that?
Well, you know what? It could be what Brian was talking a little bit about. And the cops, in many cases, are handcuffed by political correctness.
This is a picture from his trip, by the way, Steve.
Yeah. And, ever since after 9/11, many details about the actual hijackers came through, and it's like, how do we miss that? Then you look at the Tsarnaev brothers, and the FBI was tipped off by Russia.
Yeah.
Said, that guy's been radicalized.
Then and the FBI talked to them and said it was okay.
And there's one guy who was a former extremist, and he says, and even Dr. Gorky even said this yesterday, said if you just look at the travel records, and if you look at these cities where he's going and where he visited, there's no way he doesn't have ties to terror. Listen to what one of them said.
The city of Quetta isn't just a city you go and visit in Pakistan. I'm of Pakistani origin. It would be incredibly strange for me to visit Quetta. Now, I have visited Quetta, but I have visited Quetta to speak to hundreds of youth in the universities to warn them against joining extremist groups. The reason you wouldn't visit Quetta ordinarily is, first of all, Afghans aren't originally from Quetta. It would be strange for him to have family based in Quetta. If he went to Peshawar, I could probably understand it a bit more. But secondly, it's a conflict zone. It's like the average American getting up and going to see Belfast at the height of the troubles in Northern Ireland. It's a war zone. There's currently a civil war going on in Quetta. That in itself should have raised alarm bells for American authorities.
We're not at the point where we can reflect back and say, what if? Because many people, including Governor Cuomo, aren't convinced this guy acted alone.
Right.
In fact, his neighbor is on record saying, listen, this guy was not alone.
Sure.
He might have been the headmaster. He might have been the mastermind.
Said he had bad connections.
Yeah, he did have bad connections, and on top of that, we need an opportunity to talk to him. Evidently, he is not speaking right now, and we'll debate this later. We're going to find out this later. Can we delay the Miranda rights?
Here's the thing, though. The dad is saying he turned him in at one point. He hit his wife. He stabbed his son. But then I was reading reports this morning that one of the brothers in that family on Facebook has a photo supporting jihad. We showed that photo actually yesterday. Then the sister has a quote from the American terror cleric Anwar al-Awlaki. She has a quote from him. So are they all connected?
So forget about an FBI investigation. Just Google the family. During a legitimate investigation, nothing should stop the police officers from doing their job, especially given the fact that there could be somebody who is radicalized. And you look at all these dots, and today, sitting here, we can go, how'd they miss that? That should not diminish the unbelievable police work done by the police officers of New York and New Jersey and the FBI in tracking this guy down in 48 hours.
But the police chiefs and FBI directors have to come forward and say what you need to do your job more effectively in order to mobilize the people to get their representatives to do what's necessary. At the very least, we need to get more than 35,000 FBI agents out there. If there's going to be any financing or people have to work an extra day to get more FBI agents to do things in order to keep the investigations going, as James Comey said, in all 50 states.
But just take the handcuffs, the PC handcuffs, off of all the police officers,
Right.
local and federal. Let's see if
Because
that
if not, you know what happens? We have to rely on community members seeing something and saying something.
Yeah, homeless people finding bombs in tunnels.
Meanwhile, the mayors of New York, London, and Paris, in an editorial yesterday in the New York Times, said we need more unscreened refugees in our cities. This was published just 4 days after the terror attacks here in New York City. The mayor of London, and this is my favorite part of the story, warned New Yorkers this week that terror attacks are part and parcel to regular life now in the West, and that Americans should just get used to it.
Right. Thanks, Mr. London Mayor.
Thank you.
Isn't he the first Muslim mayor? I believe he's the Muslim mayor, correct, in London?
They also said the security of all of our residents is paramount, but we need to be more inclusive to combat the xenophobic language.
Okay, hop in the tube. Good luck today.
We need to worry about the language.
There you go. All about the narrative. We've heard that earlier. All right. Anyway, thanks very much for joining us on this Wednesday. We've got a busy program, and we start right now with some headlines.
We certainly do. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Hope you're off to a good day so far. He was supposed to protect our country, and now a former National Guardsman will serve 30 years in prison for an ISIS-inspired terror plot. Prosecutors playing a video in the courtroom showing Hassan Edmonds scouting the armory in Joliet, Illinois.
And if they all get to rush you, strikes first.
Yeah, those are the ones who gonna respond. Yeah, who have more better respond.
They got more time in service.
Stripes first. They have had more time in the service. How about that? Those words coming from that former Army soldier. Well, prosecutors say that Edmonds and his cousin plan to kill up to 150 people at the armory. Both were arrested at Midway Airport in Chicago in March of 2015. They say they never planned to carry out the attack. Well, overnight, a mystery odor making people sick in Northern California. The city of Vallejo, that's northeast of San Francisco, is now warning its residents to shelter in place after getting hundreds of calls about the smell. At this hour, officials don't know where it's coming from, but they say they have not found any traces of natural gas in the area. People there are being told to keep their windows shut and their air conditioners turned off. The former Florida governor, Charlie Crist, getting some unexpected laughs during a debate. Crist, now a Democratic congressional candidate, was asked if he plans to vote for Hillary Clinton this fall, and the audience had quite a reaction to his answer. Listen to this.
The thing I like most about her is I believe that she is steady. I believe that she is strong. I believe that she is honest, and I look forward to voting for her.
Governor.
Wow, that crowd laughing. You seem to hear some boos. Some people seem just incredulous at that one. After he calls Clinton honest. Crist is running against Republican incumbent David Jolly. They're now neck and neck in the recent polls. How about that one? And those are your headlines.
Does he ever stop running, Charlie Crist?
Oh, Charlie Crist.
What is he this time? Is he
He's trying to be a
Democrat or Republican?
congressman.
What party is he with now?
I think Democrat, is he?
Clearly.
Thank you very much.
Everybody has to ask that question.
He thinks Hillary's honest.
Right.
All I can think of, didn't we hear about him? He had to have a fan in the podium.
Yes, yeah.
So when he's standing there, that's all I'm thinking.
Right.
What is happening to us this morning?
All right. Meanwhile, coming up on this Wednesday, it doesn't get much closer than this. Told ya, a pilot just a tiny little bit away from death when a plane wing skims across and hits him in the head.
And Donald Trump gaining new ground this morning, retaking the lead from Hillary Clinton in North Carolina. Can he keep the momentum going? We are live in Battleground State coming up next.
Election, 48 days to go. Here we go. And a debate straight ahead.
Yep. Coming up, Hillary Clinton scrambling to regain ground, lost to Donald Trump in key battleground states over the last 2 weeks.
Fox News senior national correspondent John Roberts is live in Wilmington this morning. Hey, John.
Ainsley, Steve, Brian, good morning to you. Some bad news for Hillary Clinton here in the Tar Heel state, a state that she was hoping to be her firewall, given the number of well-educated people who have moved into the state because of the tech boom here, of course, the controversial bathroom law. But take a look at the findings of this new Elon University poll. It's got Donald Trump up 44-43 over Hillary Clinton. This is the latest poll in the last couple of weeks to show him with the lead. A Suffolk University poll last week showed him with a 3-point lead. And in Ohio, where he is headed for a full day of campaign events today. He's up by 3 to 5 points. 2 events yesterday here in North Carolina, one in High Point, one in Kenansville, north of us here in Wilmington, where Donald Trump really focused in on the issue of terrorism, given the news out of New York and New Jersey over the last few days, suggesting that Hillary Clinton has got the wrong focus when it comes to national security. Listen to this.
Hillary Clinton talks tougher about my supporters than she does about Islamic terrorists. She calls the patriotic Americans who support our campaign, many of them cops and soldiers, deplorable and irredeemable. Has she ever talked that way about radical Islam or about those who oppose and murder women and gays overseas? No.
For her part, Hillary Clinton was off the campaign trail yesterday. Her campaign said she was involved in debate prep, but curious that she canceled a big fundraiser in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. When it comes to campaigning, fundraisers are typically the last thing to get canceled. She does have a full day of events. Today, though, she's down in Orlando for a smaller event and then some fundraising as well. And one thing still hanging out there for the Trump campaign are these reports that $258,000 was paid from the Trump Foundation to settle lawsuits that should have been paid by his for-profit enterprises. His campaign insists that there were no improper payments. Kellyanne Conway says, hey, the money went to charity, but they still have not yet fully explained why money that was supposed to be paid by his for-profit enterprises instead was paid by the foundation. So likely more on that to come today. Ainsley, Steve, Brian.
All right, a very thorough report by John Roberts out in Wilmington, North Carolina. Johnny, thank you.
We try.
You do, each and every day.
See, if you're not surprised, it's thorough.
Absolutely not. He knows what he's talking about.
So good. Thank you, John.
All right, after several days of terror, a new spotlight on our border crisis as a stunning report finds a number of arrests here in the United States involving immigrants with ISIS ties. Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar, a very vocal critic of our border policies, here to react, coming up next.
Quick headlines now. Colin Kaepernick now getting death threats over his national anthem protest, but the 49ers quarterback says he welcomes them. He says if someone followed through, it would only prove his point about racial injustice. Tim Tebow now weighing in on the controversy, saying there's a right and a wrong way to stand up for what you believe in. And the military community outraged after seeing this shocking photo of a teacher stopping on a flag in a classroom. Lee Francis even asked his students for a lighter and scissors. He's now on leave and says it was part of a lesson on the First Amendment. The North Carolina school is just 12 miles from Fort Bragg. Steve, talk border.
Thank you very much, Brian. In the wake of the terror attacks in New York and New Jersey and Minnesota as well, the spotlight is once again on our border crisis. A new report from Breitbart lists 10 major terror arrests in the United States in the last 2 years, all involving people with alleged ties to ISIS who got into this country. Here to react, Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas. He's a Democrat who has been a vocal critic of the Obama administration's border policy. Congressman, good morning to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
You know, the President of the United States has made it very clear he would love to see a lot of Syrian refugees in this country. He would like to see lots more refugees across the board in the country. And we detailed a moment ago how the mayors of Paris and London and New York wrote in the New York Times yesterday, we would like some more unfiltered refugees in the country. Is that really a good idea?
Well, just to let people in just because you want to fill an arbitrary number, I think that's wrong. You know, I believe in the immigration laws that we have to make them stronger, but we have to enforce those laws. And if we're going to let people in, we got to make sure that they're properly vetted. That's why some time ago I voted with my friend Michael McCall, Congressman McCall, to make sure we're talking about refugees. We got to make sure that we verify and certify that the people coming in are not going to be a threat to us in any way or form.
Okay, there you're talking about vetting. Suddenly, for a moment, you kind of sounded like Donald Trump, and now Hillary Clinton is talking about vetting as well, which, you know, she's playing catch up on that. But, Congressman, when you look at the people who were vetted, supposedly, by the administration, allowed in the country, and this certainly is not a comprehensive list that Breitbart has put together, but you've got these 10 people over the last 2 years tied to ISIS. Those are the last people we want in.
You know, all it takes is one time to have somebody cause a lot of damage, and that's why, you know, the law enforcement and the people that go through this vetting have to be correct 100% of the time. And that's what I'm saying. If we're going to let refugees in, we got to make sure that we properly vet them, because all it takes is just one individual. We know what sort of damage they can cause to us.
Absolutely. Congressman, a moment ago we were talking about the bomber here in New York and New Jersey who, you know, yesterday the father said, yeah, I told the FBI 2 years ago my son was a terrorist. And then you look, he went to Afghanistan, he went to Pakistan a number of times, once over a year, and you start to realize, wait a minute, it looks like the feds may have not connected a lot of the dots. Unfortunately, the feds' rules of engagement are in many cases outdated. And in fact, they did great police work in finding the people, but maybe the whole PC thing is handcuffing our men and women who are trying to enforce the laws.
Well, look, you know, this thing about PC, I'll say this very carefully. PC cannot stand in the way of law enforcement doing its job. You know, we have to make sure that we let the men and women do our job. We got to make sure that the Intelligence Committee, our law enforcement, FBI, that they do their job. And unfortunately, PC does get in the way sometimes. And again, I want to be respectful of religion. I want to be respectful of cultures. But at the same time, you know, law enforcement has to do its job.
Absolutely. And of course, we've got all the Border Patrol people standing on the border between our country and Mexico, for instance, our southern border. You're from down in Texas. But the administration has placed a number of handcuffs on them where they don't really do their job. You know, they're supposed to stop people who are not in this country legally, and yet a lot of people get through.
Well, you know, what we're seeing is Border Patrol, and just a couple of days ago I was talking to one of my friends at Border Patrol. We spent a lot of time talking very frequently, and one of the things that we're seeing is that they stop them, then after a while they're, as the administration calls it, they're doing a better job at, quote, management and processing. What does that mean? That means that they can handle this folks coming in, but then they give them this notice to appear, and you know that in 3 or 4 or 5 years, you know, they might show up in court, they might not show up in court, and they might just disappear in our community. So we have to make sure our men and women at the border have the right resources and make sure that they do the job that they're supposed to, and that is stop the bad people from coming into our country.
Absolutely. Call it notice to appear. It really is a notice to disappear, unfortunately. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You bet. All right. It is about 6:30 here in New York City. Coming up, it doesn't get much closer than this. Duck. A pilot just centimeters away from death when a plane wing skims across his head. Oh my goodness, what happened, we're going to tell you. And the news sent shockwaves around the world. Brangelina is no more. They went bust. Now Brad Pitt is lashing out at his soon-to-be ex-wife. Carly Shimkus is here with rumors and reaction. She's coming up next. But first, happy birthday to, sounds like Faith Hill. She's 49 today. Singing herself happy birthday.
You know, there are a lot of important and life-threatening and world-changing things going on lately. Sometimes it seems like more than ever, but none of them are as foundation-shaking as the news we received about Brad and Angelina today. As I'm sure you've heard, Angelina Jolie filed for divorce from Brad Pitt. Apparently, the reason they're getting divorced is she talked about Fight Club, and he specifically asked her not to do that.
The election, the economy, all that, the terrorist attack, all that wiped off the front page because of Brad and Angelina.
Now, is she reacting to the divorce?
No. Brad Pitt's ex-wife.
Right.
No, they just picked that picture.
Yeah, and she yesterday was talking about karma, and they're in the cover of the Daily News. Should have never gotten married. Carly Shimkus is going to be talking all about this and so much more regarding seemingly the perfect couple, and it couldn't work for them in Tinseltown.
What a shame, especially for the kids. 6 kids, and we'll see how public this divorce is.
Pretty public so far.
We're going to get to that in just a minute, but first we're going to tell you some other headlines. Hey, Heather.
Hi, good morning. We've got some major news that's going on down in North Carolina right now. A Fox News alert, dangerous rioters taking over the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina overnight. Take a look at this. Protesters lighting fires, looting stores, and assaulting police officers. Chaos breaking out there hours after police shot and killed a 43-year-old man. Officers say he threatened them with a gun. Now, his family claims he was simply holding a book. At least 12 officers hurt in those riots, including this one who was hit with a brick. The city now preparing for the possibility of even more protests tonight. We'll follow the story throughout the day. A school cafeteria worker quits over lunch shaming. She was told to take food away from a student after his parents fell behind on school meal payments. Even worse, the school made her throw out the food as the child stood by and watched.
His eyes welled up with tears. I mean, I'll never forget his name, the look on his face. I'm not saying the parents shouldn't be held accountable, but I think there has to be a better way than involving the child.
Goodness. Well, that school district in Pittsburgh says its new policy is meant to get parents to pay for overdrawn lunch accounts. A racing pilot narrowly escaping death at an air show in Reno. Take a look at this. Ooh, an incoming plane speeding down the runway and nearly hitting him. Oh, goodness. That pilot just seconds away from hopping out of his Formula One plane following engine troubles. And that's when another jet on the runway apparently missed the warning flags to stop. It buzzed by the parked plane. Fortunately, the pilot only hurt his hand and is otherwise expected to be okay. And those are your headlines. I'll see you back here really soon. Thanks, gang.
All right. Thank you very much. Looked like a prop job, not a jet. All right. Carly Shimkus joins us from the radio and so much more. And the big news yesterday, shockwaves through Hollywood. Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie just couldn't make it work. Filed for divorce.
So what happened, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of speculation, and that's very different than fact. A lot of rumors flying around today, and a lot of them not so good for Brad Pitt. A lot of people saying that this could have had something to do with his alleged drug use or a potential affair with his allied co-star Marion Cotillard. But what we do know is that she cited irreconcilable differences in her divorce filing, and her lawyer said that she's doing this for the health of her family. And he responded to the divorce saying that, you know, he's very sad, but he wants to focus on his kids. And that's really the sad part of this story. Like you said, they have 6 children together, and she is hoping for full physical custody.
What I understand, too, is that Brad's team is very upset that she is spinning out through her surrogates that pot, or his anger problem, and possibly an affair has fueled this whole thing.
Yeah, so
he says basically
already.
Because it makes him look like a bad parent, and the quote is, she just unleashed hell, even though she doesn't want any money from him.
Yeah.
But she does want the full custody.
Well, the paparazzi, yeah, I mean, you got to feel for these kids, and them too. They're going to be all over these 2 A-listers. But I mean, this is a big shock. You know, they were.
Is it really though?
Well, they were Hollywood's hottest couple for a decade, which is like a lifetime in the entertainment
But he allegedly
industry.
did this to Jennifer Aniston back in 2004. They were in W Magazine together before his divorce was even final, with like a 60-page spread. And now he's allegedly doing it again.
I know. So all these hopeless romantics out there like me want to forget all that and think about all the positive things, and now it's just ruined.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to ask, I read one story yesterday that apparently Angelina hired a private detective?
Yeah,
Something
and again, that's a rumor that's kind of swirling around right now. But these two have such an interesting history together. They met in 2004 on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Like you said, we all remember that because he was still married to Jennifer Aniston at the time. They were together for 12 years. They have 6 kids together. And ironically, they just made a movie together about a couple. They played a couple who was going through sort of failed marriage.
That was smart. They're like, before we get divorced, let's make a movie about us. So when it comes out, we make a lot of money.
Right. It worked for Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck with Giggly, or Jiggly, whatever that was.
Wasn't a movie. Sounds like that.
Clearly, it was very popular.
This is a documentary.
Well, the problem is, as you know, we've come from theater, and the problem is, the person that he's rumored to be having an affair with, who some say is pregnant, he had to have a relationship with in that movie World War II. And when you become an actor, a method actor, you become that person Next thing you know, the movie's over and you still have those feelings.
Uh-oh, is that what happens?
That's what could
have
have
happened to you?
That's the girl. What's her name?
Marion Cotillard. Very beautiful.
Yeah, how about this? Here's what bothers me. What is a midlife crisis? A midlife crisis is when you find yourself in midlife and you haven't achieved your goals. They say that he's in the middle of a midlife crisis. My goodness, if Brad Pitt didn't achieve his goals,
he's married.
He
was married to Angie.
The best actor. What was he expecting? To own the galaxy?
I don't know. I mean, you're right up there with him. Maybe you should.
Exactly. I'm not going
teach
to
him what real life is really like.
I love that they say. That's what they say. Who's they?
Brian, I've got news for you.
She's putting on his Dr. Keith Adlow hat.
When it comes to your midlife crisis, I bought a convertible.
That's so much better. Right, especially in the summer.
Carly, listen to Carly over on the radio on
Channel 115 Sirius.
Right. Just one up from us at 114.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Carly.
All right, meanwhile, straight ahead, should the suspected New York and New Jersey bomber be treated as an enemy combatant? That's what some people are pushing for, but Lieutenant Colonel Alan West wants to take it a step further. He's reporting for duty next. Good morning to you, sir.
And a police officer saves a little boy from drowning, and then 20 years later, that boy, now grown up, finally gets to thank him for his bravery. That man and his hero are going to join us live in the next hour.
Awesome.
Listen to this. A deadly officer involved in a shooting. It spurs violent anti-police protests overnight. Listen to what happened in Charlotte. Protesters set fires in Charlotte while hurling rocks at cops. Joining us right now is Fox News contributor, former GOP Congressman, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Colonel, we have two incidents, one in Tulsa, but let's talk about first in Charlotte last night. We've seen this before, not the reaction. I don't care how this turns out. How do you stop this reaction?
Well, you have to stop having these individuals out there in the communities that are spurring on this idea of social justice or wrongdoing. We need to sit back and allow the system and the process to take place. There will be an investigation. If there is wrongdoing, we'll get the facts. Look at what happened in Milwaukee, where people took to the streets, and the narrative that was initially out there turned out to not be the true narrative, just the same as in Ferguson, Missouri, when the narrative of hands up, don't shoot turned out to be a completely wrong narrative.
So there's another shooting, too, a day before. It happened in Tulsa, where a man was stuck outside of his car, an African-American man, and evidently a female officer felt as though he was threatened or was reaching for something. She said he was on PCP. Drugs may or may not have been found in the car. We don't know all the facts. It does not look good for the officer, I'll give you that, but we don't know all the facts. It didn't stop Hillary Clinton from weighing in on the Steve Harvey show last night.
This horrible shooting again? How many times do we have to see this in our country? In Tulsa, an unarmed man with his hands in the air? I mean, this is just unbearable, and it needs to be intolerable. And so, you know, maybe I can, by speaking directly to white people, say, look, this is not who we are. We've got to do everything possible to improve policing, to go right at implicit bias.
Really? She's going to speak directly to white people?
Well, the problem with Hillary Clinton is that she knows that she's losing support in the black community. I think she's only at 76%. That's one of the lowest that you've seen with any recent Democratic presidential nominee. But the thing that is interesting, the hypocrisy, is that coming off of the bombing suspect there in New York City, where everyone said you can't rush the judgment.
Yeah.
Don't be so impetuous in saying anything. And then what does Hillary Clinton come out and do? So there is an incredible duplicity, a hypocrisy that is out there. And this is all about electoral patronage.
Absolutely. So let's talk about something else going on. Let's talk about what happened with the bombing in New York and New Jersey over the weekend. We got the guy, he's 28-year-old, he's Ahmed Rahimi. So the question is, he is not answering any questions as he tries to recover from his wounds with this A+ care he's getting in the hospital. So everyone says, well, what do you want? Give him his Miranda rights, it's a criminal offense. Is that really the case, that we have to treat him like a criminal? Or isn't there a precedent of treating him like an enemy combatant, as Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator McCain said yesterday?
Well, I think what we have to start doing is look at how do we have better policies when it comes to dealing with Islamic terrorism, which respects no borders or boundaries. And when you have citizens of the United States of America to take up arms against the United States of America here domestically, I think that you need to have a policy for 72 and 96 hours where those Miranda rights are held up for intelligence gathering purposes. And then after that period, then his Miranda rights or her Miranda rights are read to him. But now he's lawyered up and he's not going to say anything. Just the same as if you are an American citizen, natural born and naturalized, and you leave this country and you're on the battlefield, you lose your citizenship. You lose your rights, just the same as Anwar al-Awlaki, who was killed in a drone strike. So we need to have better policies and procedures that talk about how we deal with this.
And we can do this, Colonel, with a clear head and putting politics aside, because we all want the same goals. The ISIS al-Qaeda threat that's here, which they might be using American citizens to activate because they know they're going to be treated through criminal courts. He's going to be lawyered up, cost us a fortune. We know he's going to prison for life, but we need to get the intelligence out of him. And by the way, his own neighbor said that he was working with other people. Now, right now, they're investigating to him possibly working alone, being a lone wolf. Well, if he just gathered the facts about people that know him best, he was collaborating with somebody.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And his father even told the FBI a couple of years ago that, my son is a terrorist. And so, again, we have to stop hamstringing ourselves. We have to come up with clear-cut policies and procedures that lets people know that we are not going to create gaps by which you can be exploited.
This literally could be a ticking time bomb. There could be another bomb or a series of bombs set in your neighborhood, someone watching right now. Unless we can question him and get maximum intelligence out of him, we'll never know. Colonel, thanks so much. Hopefully Congress and the next president can get together on this.
Thank you, Brian.
Coming up straight ahead. It turns out the email scandal was just the start. Hillary may have awarded her top donors, top posts inside the State Department to the tune of 190. State Department spokesperson John Kirby here live to answer that question and so much more. The Admiral soon. Then, here's what America needs. More Muslim refugees.
We should all understand that ultimately our world will be more secure if we are prepared to help those in need.
But our next guest, who had once advised David Cameron, says these kinds of words make world leaders roll their eyes, especially their people and their citizens. All right, President Obama knows what America needs: more Muslim refugees.
Alternative visions of the world have pressed forward. Aggressive nationalism, a crude populism, sometimes from the far left, but more often from the far right, which seeks to restore what they believe was a better, simpler age free of outside contamination. We have to open our hearts and do more to help refugees who are desperate for a home.
So let's bring in Steve Hilton. He's the CEO of CrowdPack and the former director of strategy for the British Prime Minister, David Cameron. Nice to see you, Steve. Thanks. Welcome back.
Good to see you again. Good morning.
What do you make of this? What do you think about that? Because there are a lot of people that say, let's bring him in. We need to have a heart as a country.
That's true. I think every American would agree with that. Look, I'm very much in favor of being good to refugees. I grew up in the UK, but my parents were refugees from communism in Hungary. I think we'd all agree that we want to help people who are in really dire straits. But that doesn't mean that you just open the door and let anyone in without checking whether they actually are going to be the kind of people you want in your society.
And Steve, I bet when your parents immigrated, they did a little vetting of your parents when they were, let's look into what they were like in Hungary to make sure that these are people we want in our new country.
That's right. I can't see why it's seen as something unreasonable to want to make sure that the people that you invite to live in your home, in your country, are the kind of people that are going to be good citizens and support your society and your economy.
Look at the payment that Angela Merkel has paid out. Her party got hammered. She's going to walk back her refugee, all in, millions can come into Germany policy. So what are we learning from the first phase of refugee acceptance?
Well, the first thing is that what one country does affects everyone else, because the fact that Angela Merkel said to everyone living in the Middle East and victimized by what's going on there come to Germany. Well, they did come to Germany, but they also ended up all over Europe as well. So the decision of one country affects lots of other countries.
6 were ISIS tossed out over the last weekend. 6 were tossed out, members of ISIS.
I know, this is just something that we really have to take much more seriously. It's not enough to just say, let's have a heart and let's be kind. We've actually got to take it really seriously. And I think that part of the solution is actually dealing with the problem that caused this massive refugee crisis in the first place, which is what's going on in Syria and the rest of the Middle East.
So, as President Obama yesterday lectured the world from the United Nations, if you were to give him a message on his way out, what would it be?
Well, I think the first thing is when you saw that speech, it really reminded me of the reason why a lot of other world leaders and others who've dealt with the president over the last 8 years kind of roll their eyes when he says this kind of thing, because the way he talks, it's almost as if he's some kind of intrigued bystander of events, who's kind of the sociology professor analysing the world, rather than the guy who's been there in the Oval Office supposedly shaping events.
Steve, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be
yesterday here. Was a run-through through his resume. He also went after Donald Trump subtly yesterday.
And not so subtly. With the wall business. Steve, thank you.
A Fox News alert: chaos on the streets of Charlotte. Protesters are upset over a police-involved shooting, hurling rocks and bricks at the officers, shutting down roads and setting fires, and we are live in the next hour.
And it turns out the email scandal was just the start. Hillary may have awarded top donors, top posts inside the State Department as well. State Department spokesperson John Kirby is live next. The Admiral's here. Attention.
Good morning to you and your family. It is Wednesday. It's September 21st. I'm Ainsley Earhart. We start with us, a Fox News alert. This is all breaking overnight. Chaos erupting after a deadly police shooting in North Carolina. Fires set in the streets, as you can see. Tear gas, riots. One officer hit in the face with a brick. We are live with these details just coming in.
And new details about the chicken shop terrorist over in Jersey, reported by his own father to the FBI 2 years ago. The dad said, "My son's a terrorist." What did the FBI do? They eventually closed the investigation. Did the G-men drop the ball? We're going to tell you what we know.
And before we start the second hour of Fox and Friends, the reviews are in on hour number 1.
This is a tremendous job. You guys are doing really a great job. And let me say this, your ratings are great, and they're getting even better right now.
More election impressions from Frank Caliendo, because it's not just about John Madden anymore. Your mornings are better with Friends.
Guys, let's get right to that Fox News alert. Rioters taking to the streets there, as you see, in Charlotte, North Carolina overnight, hours after police kill a man that they say aimed a gun at them.
At least a dozen officers are hurt, including this officer who was hit in the face with a brick.
That's not good. Abby Huntsman is here with breaking details as the city braces for the possibility of more protests tonight. They're already forecasting that.
Already. We've been following this story all morning. Good morning, you guys. This can only be described as absolute chaos. More than 100 protesters taking over the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina for hours overnight. Rioters shutting down traffic on Interstate 85, looting cargo trucks and setting things on fire. With police standing guard outside of a Walmart, you can see here, surrounded by shattered glass after looters took over the store, stealing TVs and iPads. And this incredible video showing rioters jumping on top of a police cruiser, other cop cars kicked and destroyed with large rocks, officers dressed in riot gear trying to control the crowds by standing in line. But as the night escalated, they were forced to deploy tear gas. At least 12 officers are hurt, including that one that we showed you earlier, hit in the face with a brick. A reporter also hurt in that chaos. The protests breaking out hours after police shot and killed 43-year-old Keith Scott. Officers were looking for another man when they saw Scott get out of his car holding a gun.
As they engage him, he is armed with a handgun that we found on scene as well. Makes some imminent threat to them, and because of that, at least one of our officers fired.
Well, Scott's family insists he is disabled and was holding a book, not a gun, waiting for his son to get home from school. When police showed up, his daughter live streamed the aftermath on Facebook. The officer who pulled the trigger is now on administrative leave. Police now say only 4 of 5 protesters are under arrest this morning. But as you said, we're hoping for us a peaceful night tonight, you guys. More peaceful, at least.
Yeah. All right, Abby, thank you very much.
Thank you, Abby.
All right, let's bring in Admiral John Kirby. You know him. He's the official spokesperson for the Secretary of State and the State Department. He's in town for the United Nations.
I am.
Good morning to you.
Thank you.
We have a lot of things to talk to you about. First up, I think the most important thing, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, I'm going to have to decline comment on that.
I'm kidding. I'm pulling your leg.
All right, let's talk about what the president remarks yesterday, and he talks about we should all accept more refugees in. A lot of people are unnerved by that, especially after they see what happened in Europe and the way it's boomeranged in Germany. Why should people feel good about bringing in refugees? Even though we have big hearts, we also don't want to be blown up in a subway.
Well, you're right. We do have big hearts, and it's a part of American DNA to be a refuge for people that are in need. And I would tell you that, you know, the more than 10,000 now Syrian refugees that we've admitted into the country by this month have all been extremely and very stridently vetted. In fact, Syrian refugees by the whole interagency, DHS, the intelligence.
We don't have their paperwork, Admiral. You know that. Because Syria doesn't exactly accept people streaming in and out to get their Social Security card.
There's certainly not the same amount of information you have on individuals there that you would have here. But I would tell you a couple of things. First of all, they're the most vulnerable individuals. 8 out of 10 of the more than 10,000 Syrian refugees that we've admitted to the country are women and children. And of the men that make up the remainder, most of them are connected to families. Number 2, they are going through a very serious interagency vetting process, the most that any refugee goes through. Is it perfect? Can it be perfect? Can it be foolproof? Well, probably not, no. But it is very, very serious.
Settled government. And on top of that, people are stunned by how few Christians are coming here as opposed to the Muslims that are coming here.
Well, it's just that the majority of the population in Syria is Muslim. I mean, that's just a demographic fact.
But they're not the only ones oppressed.
No, of course not. Oh, absolutely not. I wouldn't begin to suggest that. We take in, like, in fiscal year 16, we're on track, or we actually made, or going to make a goal of about 85,000 total refugees from around the world.
You feel good about 85,000?
We feel good that it's done appropriately, it's done thoroughly, that the vetting is good. And the president has talked about the fact that we're going to up the number of total refugees to more than 100,000 for fiscal year 17.
Well, I mean, but you know that somebody who's made vetting an issue on the campaign trail is Donald Trump, and he has famously talked about extreme vetting where, you know, the bad apples are not going to get in. Hillary Clinton, over the last 2 days, has decided she's going to hop on the vetting bandwagon, and now she's talking about it. Here she is 2 days ago.
I am absolutely in favor of and have long been an advocate for tough vetting, for making sure that we don't let people into this country.
See, that's what people want to make sure. We'll let them in. We got a big heart, but we got to make sure they're not bad actors.
And I can tell you that the vetting is tough. It is very, very stringent, particularly for
when it comes to Syria. They have no. When ISIS went into the various municipalities, they took the government printing presses and all of the blank passports. So they got ISIS guys running around who aren't really from Syria.
Well, I wouldn't debate the fact that there's the potential for ISIS terrorists to try to insert themselves, and we've seen that in some of the refugee camps in Jordan and in Turkey, where they're trying to insert themselves into the population. Right. But again, the vetting process, while not perfect, is very, very stringent. And it can take almost up to 2 years for a single refugee to make it to the country.
All it takes is one person. The problem is the timing of all of this. We've had more attacks here in the U.S. over the last few years. It seems, I mean, this summer we were having one every week. The timing of this, it seems to be very insensitive to the American people who have gotten here the right way, or the American people that want to keep our country safe.
Well, let's remember, though, the bulk of these attacks that you're talking about are not from refugees. In fact, since the 1970s.
Look at this guy just this weekend in New York. He's been here for just 15 years. If you look at his brother and his sister's Facebook pages, there's evidence that they're tied to terror.
Well, look, I can't talk about the investigation that's going on. It's a criminal investigation. I won't get ahead of that. But I can tell you that, you know, since the 70s, we've admitted millions of refugees. A fraction of 1% of them were sent out of the country because of terrorist or violent criminal behavior. So it's not a refugee problem necessarily. What we do have to worry about, and what is a serious concern, is this ISIL-inspired narrative that actually attracts people to self-radicalize for whatever reason. And we're working very, very hard with the interagency to try to combat that, particularly in the social media realm.
You can't point to Syria and see progress when you see all these people displaced, when you see the Russians doing their own thing, bombing a UN convoy yesterday, pretending as if they're outraged that we bombed Syrian troops, perhaps by mistake, after they've been watching as Assad, their buddy, killed 400,000 people.
Well, we're obviously deeply concerned by what's going on in Syria right now. The Secretary met with the other members of the International Syria Support Group yesterday. Everybody was very downhearted about what happened on Monday when the UN convoy was struck. And you're right, we hold Russia responsible for that, because no matter who hit it, and there's only 3 people flying airplanes in Syria, it's the coalition, we know it wasn't us, it's the Russians, and it's the Syrians. So we're going to hold Russia responsible for that, because Russia made a commitment that they would influence Assad to do the right thing and to abide by the cessation of hostilities. Obviously, that didn't happen in this case. But all that said, the leaders of the International Syria Support Group yesterday recommended trying to move forward with this same arrangement, this arrangement that we're going to try to get a ceasefire in place in and around Aleppo, we're going to try to get the UN aid convoys in there, and we're going to try to get the sides back to political talks.
All right, Admiral, let's talk a little bit about Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. You've been bracing for this. I know you've been answering a lot of questions about pay for play. Now it turns out that 194 donors, either to the Hillary Clinton campaign or to the Clinton Foundation, were awarded slots on State Department advisory boards. And it certainly is not illegal. That does happen. But the whole pay-for-play thing comes into the question about how did these people who simply gave money to the Clintons wind up on these State Department advisory boards?
Well, I've seen the press reporting on this. I haven't actually seen the actual list that you're talking about, but I am aware of the story. So I'm afraid I don't have much on to confirm the actual information in there. That said, and I won't speak for the decisions that they made when Secretary Clinton was Secretary of State. What I can tell you is that these advisory boards are important. They do help us do a better job at the State Department, and that we look for people to be members of the boards that have diverse backgrounds.
Sure, and you look for people who are, for instance, one of the people, I don't know that was really qualified, UNESCO, which is a humanitarian organization, one of the people, Kaki Hockerschmidt, a big donor, turns out Kaki Hockerschmidt, an interior designer. I don't know if that would qualify you to work on UNESCO, right. And I know you're very interested in who goes on the board. It just looks fishy.
I understand the optics there, but again, I can't speak to the decisions that they made at the time in terms of who got on the board or who didn't. But we do look for a diverse background. We do look for experience levels. We do look for people that are qualified to give us advice and counsel. That's what the boards are all about. But again, I just don't know about the decisions there.
How much harder is your job, being that you had all these things to handle, as well as trying to justify what Hillary Clinton did over the last 4 years? Most of your job is questions about her 4 years, and you must be saying to yourself, can I just do this job? I mean, how much of a distraction has it been?
No, look, the job's hard enough. Being a spokesman is tough in any environment, and there's a lot going on in the world. What we've tried to focus on with respect to this particular issue is our responsibilities at the State Department and explaining the policies and regulations that were in place then, the ones that are in place now, and how we're trying to improve going forward. The Secretary has been very, very open and forthright about admitting we can do a better job with our records management at the State Department. We want to be more transparent. And
you sure? I mean, don't jump to conclusions.
Well, yeah. No, we know we can do a better job with records management, and he's hired a former ambassador to come in and do nothing but help us be better at transparency. So, look, I don't view it as a distraction. It's part of my job. When you stand up there every day, that's what you got to do.
Admiral, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Great to be with you guys.
From us.
My pleasure. Great
Good
to be
luck
with
at the UN.
Thanks.
All right, Heather, tell us what else is happening.
All right, good morning. A couple other things going on I want to tell you about. He was supposed to protect our country. Instead, a former National Guardsman will serve 30 years in prison for an ISIS-inspired terror plot. Prosecutors playing a video in court showing Hassan Edmonds scouting an armory in Joliet, Illinois.
And if they all get to rush you, strikes first.
Yeah, those are the ones who gonna respond. Yeah. Who have better response.
They got more time in service.
All right, well, Edmonds and his cousin plan to kill up to 150 people at the Armory. Both were arrested at Midway Airport in Chicago in March of 2015. The two claimed they never planned to carry out the attack. Overnight, a mystery odor making people sick in Northern California. The city of Vallejo, that's northeast of San Francisco, now warning its residents to stay in their homes after they received hundreds of calls about a smell. At this hour, officials don't know what it is or where it's coming from, but they say they have not found any traces of natural gas. Today, the man in charge of the IRS will beg Congress to let him keep his job. John Koskinen is facing impeachment for allegedly standing in the way of an investigation into the IRS targeting scandal. Now, that discriminated against conservative groups that were seeking to get tax-exempt status. According to a prepared statement, Koskinen thinks it's, quote, improper to oust him. And those are your headlines. I'll see you back here in just a little bit. A lot going on today.
He used the word improper?
Yeah.
He used the word improper?
Yep.
Okay.
Delicious. All right. Thank you very much, Heather. All right. How's this for a history lesson? A high school teacher just miles away from an important U.S. military base stomping on the American flag. He says it's just part of his lesson plan.
And the comedian Frank Callion in the election spirit.
That's so loud.
Okay, we're going to wake him up. He's going to join us on this curvy couch as he talks some politics with us.
He's out.
You don't want to miss that.